picture a man, the founder of not one, but two legendary bands. A man who wrote his name into rock history twice, with two different groups. Picture a man whose voice was so essential that those famous harmonies could never have existed without it. His voice was the soul of a generation, but that same man was thrown out of the very bands he founded. For years, he was estranged from his closest friends, and he spent a huge part of his life on the edge of destroying himself. This man was David Crosby, founder of the Byrds and of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. One of the most beautiful voices of the Golden Age, but also the owner of one of the most turbulent, most rebellious, most contradictory lives of all. Today is his birthday, and today we're going to tell you about that rebellious genius, because his story is not just a story of success. It's also a story of a fall, a loss, and an unbelievable rebirth. Here is the real David Crosby. If you've taken your seats and subscribed, we're beginning. David Crosby was born in 1941 in Los Angeles. He was the son of an Oscar-winning cinematographer, so art was in his blood and all around him from the very start. In 1964, he came together with a few young musicians, and they formed a band, the one we told you about before in our Gene Clark video, the Byrds. The Byrds exploded. They covered Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man. It went to #1, and they created a genre called folk rock. And Crosby's unique high harmonies were an inseparable part of the band's sound. Crosby was talented, but he was also headstrong. He defended his ideas and did not back down easily. This made him powerful as an artist. But it also caused friction within the band. And in 1967, things fell apart. At the Monterey Pop Festival, Crosby played not only with his own band, the Byrds, but also took the stage with another band, Buffalo Springfield. On top of that, he made long speeches on stage and waded into controversial subjects. His bandmates were furious, and shortly after, Crosby was thrown out of the Byrds. The band he had founded had cast him out. For most people, this could have been an ending, but when it came to Crosby, it was only a beginning. After leaving the Byrds, Crosby, of course, did not sit still. He brought Joni Mitchell's first album to life as its producer. Yes, he was one of the people who introduced Joni Mitchell to the world. And then a kind of magic happened. Crosby came together with two other musicians. One was Stephen Stills from Buffalo Springfield. The other was Graham Nash from the English band The Hollies. As the story goes, the first time the three of them sang together, when they heard how those three voices came together, they all froze. There was such a harmony that they immediately understood this was something special. Crosby, Stills, and Nash had been born, and their first album in 1969 went down in music history. The harmonies of those three voices became the anthem of a generation. Soon, a fourth name joined, Neil Young, and the group became CSNY. They took the stage at Woodstock. They made a masterpiece like Déjà Vu. They were now one of the biggest bands in the world. But all this brilliance was slowly bringing a darkness along with it. One of the greatest sorrows of David Crosby's life came in 1969. His girlfriend, Christine, lost her life in a car accident. Crosby was shattered, and to cope with that pain, he turned more and more to substances. Sadly, let's say something clearly here. Crosby battled heavy addiction for decades. We're not telling you this to glorify it, nor to exploit it, but we do have to touch on it, even a little, because this addiction almost completely destroyed his life. It ruined his talent, his relationships, his health, and everything. As the addiction grew, Crosby's relationships with his closest friends fell apart. He became estranged from Stills, from Nash. The three voices that had created those magnificent harmonies could no longer even speak to one another. By the mid-1980s, Crosby had hit rock bottom. His health had collapsed. His career was over. And at one point, He would even go to prison. Everyone thought the same thing about him. This man will not make it. This will be another tragic story of a rock star, the end of another lost genius. But David Crosby had one quality. He was, truly, a survivor. Crosby came back from that rock bottom. He fought his addiction. He fought for his health. Years later, he even had a liver transplant and survived. And he returned to music. With his old friends, they came together again as CSN and CSNY. The harmonies, the beauty, had returned. But the real miracle happened in the final years of his life. In his 70s, David Crosby had an incredible burst of creativity. He released album after album. Perhaps he made the most beautiful, most mature work of his career after the age of 70. The man everyone once called lost had, at the end of his life, been reborn. David Crosby died in January 2023 at the age of 81. He left behind a legacy that had entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, with 2 different bands. But more importantly, he left behind a life that showed that falling is not the end. What he lived through and showed us was a lesson. That lesson teaches us this: a person can be deeply flawed, deeply talented, deeply fragile, and deeply strong, all at the same time. That is exactly who David Crosby was. And today, on his birthday, let's listen to that voice. Guinevere, or Déjà Vu. Let's hear the Crosby inside those harmonies. And let's not forget that his voice accompanied the most beautiful moments of a generation. Let's not forget Crosby. Happy birthday, Crows, not for hearing us. Thank you for letting us hear you. We're so glad you were here.